Hi there, and welcome to episode 14 of this generation's conversation, the Relentless edition. Today we are starting a brand new series. We are talking all about worship, the true worshipper. What does it really mean to worship? Who can worship? This and many more answers will be answered in this series and in today's episode. You will be so blessed as you listen, so make sure that you go ahead and you share this episode with somebody today. Be blessed as you listen. Hello, and welcome to another episode of this generation's conversation, the Relentless edition. Today we are talking about worship, the true worshiper and what it means to worship. And today we have two amazing women here with us, worshipers, choir leaders. We've got, do you guys want to introduce yourselves? Dominique.
Okay. Yeah. So my name is Dominique, and like Lizzie said, I'm one of the RG choir leaders.
Awesome stuff. And Judy, this is not really introducing yourselves, is it?
I mean, it's better than nothing, no.
Things give thanks. What's it doing? Hi guys, my name's Judy. And yeah, I'm part of RG Choir.
Awesome.
And
you sounded like you wanted to add something else there.
No, I'm okay still.
Alright, cool, leave it there. Alright, brilliant stuff. So it's great to have you guys with us today. And I think, well, without much further ado, let's just kick it off and, find out what does it mean to embody the true worshiper. So my first question for you guys today is, what is worship?
Dom's trying to kick it off.
That's fine. What is worship? For me, I would just say worship is showing reverence or showing honor to God. Mm-hmm. Just like respecting the fact that He is the one that is bigger, He is the one that is in charge and in control. Mm-hmm. And honestly, you can do that in different ways. I guess we'll get into that a bit later on. But the basic line is to show reverence, to show that you honor Him, to show that He is the one that's most important. So that is what that means for me.
Amen. What is worship? I think when we look at the definition of worship, and the fact that it's actually derived from the English word worship, which denotes the worth or inherent value of the individual receiving special honor or reverence due to that, due to him, her, in the worship in itself. And I feel like that's what it is. It's us actually, putting worth or value. And I guess it's also worship in itself. It's more of a heart. It's all to do with the posture of the heart. It's really to do with the posture of the heart. It's about what does your heart value? What does your heart set on? What is it geared towards? What is your heart submitted to? What does it show submission to? What does it prostrate to? What does it have loyalty to? Dedication and absolute obedience. Where is your heart? Where's your heart set in that particular point? And wherever it's set to is what it will worship.
That's what you're
worshiping. That's what you put value on. You put value on what you submit to. You put value on what you're loyal to. You put value on what you're dedicated and obedient to. And that could only happen when you have a right revelation of who God truly is.
Yeah.
If you don't know who God is, you can't worship something you don't really know. It's you can't
you can try.
You can try. You can really try. So yeah, for me that's worship is.
I really like that. It's what you put value on, and it's all about the heart posture. That just makes me want to ask the question then. So I guess, does it mean then that you can worship other things?
Definitely, no. There's a whole thing about you can make an idol. People worship idols as well. You can make idols of other things in life, and literally it goes back to what do you view as deserving of your respect? Or what do you view as, oh, this thing is so important, I must give my attention to this, or I must submit myself to this? And I think that Judy mentioned, I might be jumping ahead a little bit, but when you know, you have to know, or you should know, that thing or that person in our case, who is God, we have to know who it is that we're worshipping, because it then shows us how to worship. Because essentially, that's why that scripture, I think, goes on to say that because God is spirit, so that is why we worship Him in spirit. So it's one of these things of, once you have a revelation, it then informs the way you worship. But by the basic definition, you could actually end up, and this way, God, check yourself, you could end up worshipping things. I'm sure some people out there worship a car, like, oh, this car, I want this car. Like, they have this idea in their head that this car is the most important thing. Jules, what do you think about that one?
I think it's very possible to worship other things. I think you can even worship people. It's like, what is sitting on the throne of your heart? I think that's the main question. What is singing on the throne of your heart? Because whatever's on the throne of your heart, that is what you will bow to, that is what you will prostrate to. So, like, it just reminded me of Revelation chapter 4 from verse 9 to 11. Excuse me for 2 seconds. I really want to read this thing. I want to read it properly.
Bring the Bible up.
I've got to bring the word. Bring the word. Come on.
Bring the living now.
So it says, when the living creatures give glory and honor and thanks to Him who sits on the throne, who lives forever and ever, the 24 elders fall down before him who sits on the throne and worship Him who lives forever and ever. They cast their crowns before the throne, saying, "You are worthy, O Lord, to receive glory and honor and power. You have created all things, and by your will they exist and were created." So the first thing is, like, they casted their crowns down. So it's like you having to put yourself aside, putting the things that you want aside. As a song that
putting your own honor aside.
Like, hello, put it to one side. like like the song says, casting crowns, lifted hands, bowing heart, and it's just like, so it shows like you put yourself aside, you surrender to God with your lifted hands, and then your bowing heart shows that you're prostrate in honor to God and for who He is. The fact that He is the creator of the universe, like Dave expressed where Pastor Jeffy was talking about the names of God. Like, when you realize who God is, your heart,
your heart
has to bow. Your heart can't be standing there, like standing like the letter I. It actually can't. Like, you really have to. You have to, the creator, not just of the universe. There are universes, like the creator of universes, and we stand in awe. And when you stand in awe, but your heart is prostrate before God in honor to God. Like, I'll say.
Back to the question, you can definitely worship something that's other than God. So check your heart position. And that's us every day. That's a constant thing of, Lord, may my heart be correct. You know, the psalmist says, I hate a quoting scripture like this, but it's good. No, it's good. Create in me a clean heart and renew a right spirit within me. And that one is so that we can worship Him. Because if we don't have the right heart position, are we really going to be able to worship God?
I think it's definitely like your worship has got everything to do with the posture of your heart. It's like giving to God our total love. It's literally you standing before it's like you being before the throne of God and saying, Lord, I give you everything. And I think, is it Romans chapter 1? Why is she laughing?
I'm not sure.
It's in the book. I know it's in the book of Romans, where it talks about, like, present yourselves as a living sacrifice, holy and acceptable. Thank you. It said holy and acceptable. Unto God, for this is your reasonable. In some versions, it says this is your reasonable service. But and it says this is your reasonable worship. Giving everything unto God is also a way in which we worship God in spirit and in truth.
That's all I can say to that. Is that's amazing, because, like, you know, I think the heart posture is what is the most important. Is, you know, you have to bow and throw everything else to one side. With that in mind, you know, I guess my next question is, so who is allowed to lead worship then? Can anybody just lead worship?
I think we need to put, in terms of worship, when we're talking about worship, we need to put it in the context of, if we're talking about it in the context of music, because music is simply a way of us expressing It's just a form. Yeah, it's just a form of worship. It's not worship it's not the totality of worship in itself. I think it'd be remiss if we didn't explain that worship is not a tempo. I think a lot of us grew up in church thinking worship is when the music is slow down, and praise is when the music is fast. I'm not even joking. If you had asked me 10 years ago, that's the answer I would have genuinely given you, because that's all I knew, because I hadn't actually really gone to understand worship or sat in this secret place and decided to study what worship actually is and the power of worship through music. So I think if we're talking about in the context of leading worship in terms of music, in church, and who can lead it, is that what we're asking?
Yes, so that is what we're asking. Just to clarify, that is what we're asking. So who is allowed to lead worship in the context of music and getting up in the church and, you know, singing, that sort of thing? Who's allowed to lead?
I mean, I feel like, first of all, singing is just a tool to express our obedience and submission and loyalty and dedication to God. It's just a vehicle. I think it's that in itself. Singing in itself is not the totality of worship. I believe that singing should carry the spirit of true worship. Our singing should carry the spirit of true worship, and when done properly, will touch the heart of God. So I think in terms of who should do it in church, I believe that who should do it in church. I believe that obviously if it's an established church, and you know, it's not. If it's a small let's say if it's a small gathering and there's nobody really there that can actually do it, you know, well, that is a called worship leader, which we'll go into later, because it's a calling. It's a calling. Sorry. I think I'm so sorry, guys. But yeah, I feel like if your heart is in the right place, I feel that you should be able to do it in terms of a small church where their ministries haven't exactly been properly established. But in a church where the different ministries have been established and are growing and are fruitful, I believe that a worship leader should lead worship. I mean, anybody can lead into a time of worship, but I feel like it should be the designated role of a worship or the worship team to lead worship. I wouldn't just randomly call anybody from outside and say, come and lead worship. The same way I wouldn't call any singer outside and tell them to lead worship. I wouldn't just call any random person. No, you can't do that.
No, I imagine calling Beyonce.
You actually can't.
No, I actually had to press where I was trying to go about my laugh, because where my mind was going. There's truth to that. I think it's very interesting, that question, because it's one thing to be a worship leader, but that doesn't mean that we're not all called to worship. And I think that's something that we should not go past without mentioning, because, you know, when we think about it, if worship is, or you know, in Romans 12, when it says that we should all present ourselves as living sacrifices, because that is a reasonable worship. So going back to what Judy began to talk on about the fact that music is just one form of worship, we shouldn't get too caught up thinking, oh, well, since I'm not a called worship leader, I'm not supposed to worship God. Please don't. I don't want anyone to confuse that, because I think without understanding it, at first, honestly, when you grow up with people saying, oh, thank you for, like, if there's a worship leader, and you might grow up hearing pastors say, oh, thank you for leading us in worship, that kind of thing. You might get caught in the thought pattern that, oh, only that person can worship God. And it's a sticky trap, man. Like, you don't need to be thinking like that, because all of us were called to worship God in one way or another. I believe all of us should be willing to sing unto God, even if we are not a worship leader. It doesn't mean that we will be the one going up on stage to lead the worship, but when we're leading the congregation, quote unquote, leading the congregation in worship, everyone down there in the congregation, every one of us in the congregation should be worshiping.
Oh yeah.
We may not be the one leading, but we are worshiping. So it's one of these things where, regardless of position, regardless of if you have the calling of worship leader, just because it is not your primary calling, does not mean that you should not practice worship.
Oh, yeah.
So that's a side.
100, yeah.
Okay. So, again, just sort of thinking about worship in the context of music. How can because you guys have talked about, how everybody as Christians, if you're a part of the congregation, we're called to worship and we're called to worship God. And I guess, how can you tell the difference? How can you discern the difference between if you are a worship leader or you just like to sing? Because there are people who just like to sing, but, situation and circumstances have ended up throwing them into a position where they are worship leaders. So how can you delineate between the difference of, is this just something I like to do, or is this something that God has called me to do? Dominique, you can go.
So this one I think is interesting again. I think all so far has been very interesting. Let me just say first things first. I have a strong conviction that once you are called to be a worship leader, you will, if you don't initially, you will grow to enjoy singing. And let me try to rephrase that and explain what I mean by that. It's true that some people might just enjoy singing and they might think, oh, because I enjoy it, that means it is what I'm supposed to do. But then there's also another aspect of it where, when there's some people that like to talk about the fact that God will gift certain people with things, and singing might come naturally to some people, and that might then be an indication that, okay, maybe this is your calling. But then, I'm giving a lot of options here because I'm thinking a lot of different things. But then it's interesting because, we heard maybe when Moses was like, oh, I can't speak because I stammer. So it's a thing where he didn't like to speak, but his calling was to be a leader. His calling was to step forward and speak for the people and speak on their behalf before Pharaoh. So to start off, again, I'm sorry that I'm speaking in circles, but there's a lot in my mind about this one. So the first thing I said was that if it is your calling to be a worship leader, you grow to love singing, or you grow to enjoy it. Part of that is the fact that as you sing and as you worship, and as you do it more and more, you will bless yourself. Does not make sense? Does not make sense? That there we go. Okay. That as we sing and as we worship God, we are blessed by it. I know it's something Pastor JP said sometimes that when he's preaching, he's like, I'm blessing myself right now. And I thought, the first time I heard that, I thought, oh, that's brilliant, that's awesome. And then you actually think about it, if it is your calling, how can you not be a blessing? Does that make sense? And if you're a blessing, then how can you not enjoy that? So that's where I view it. I do believe, though, it's entirely possible that some people could just like singing. Let's be honest. But I think that shows itself in the longevity of the ministry.
Yeah.
Maybe.
Oh, she started.
What's that mean?
There's a raver. No, there's a raver word in that. Now I like, just to go off what Dom said, and I think also one of the things you need to do, you need to ask your heart. What is your motive? When you're standing with the microphone in your hand, what is your motive? Is your motive to let people know that you can sing, or is your motive to worship God? What is it? Is your motive to commune with God? Is that your motive when you're doing it? And I think your motive can sometimes tell you, actually, maybe it's not really in, your circle of grace. Maybe it's not. But I think definitely, I think the first thing you need to, if you're not sure if you're a worship leader or just a singer, ask your heart. Do you have a heart for worship? Worship leaders just love to commune with God. They just love having communion with God, because that's what worship is. It's a part of worship is our communion with God. It's our relationship with God, and our relationship with God really plays a massive part in our worship. Because like we said before, You can't worship somebody you don't know. So the way to get to know somebody is to have a relationship with them, and through that relationship, we are able to worship. You will definitely notice that you have the grace, that God would have given you a grace in that particular ministry. It's not something that you'll sit there and be struggling and be struggling and be.
And then it's easy then, and God forbid it happen, like, because you will be blessed, right? Please, every day, Lord, please keep us humble. And this is in any ministry, any kind of thing, because the enemy will always come and then try to put a sense of pride, or then try to make it seem like, oh, you did that, look at you, you're doing this, and then it can end up flipping the script where now you're only singing now because you enjoy singing, because you make. So then it's one of these things where, with everything, every day, create in me a clean heart, oh Lord, and renew a right spirit within me. Just ask God will be centering us back down to Him, and that we will never get caught up in maybe the praises of men, or we will never get caught up in.
Definitely.
Oh, yeah, and so
definitely. I think the thing is, it's about learning to serve the giver and not the gift. Don't serve the gift. The gift was given to you for you to serve God. That's what it was. The gift that God has given to you, you give it straight back to Him. Definitely. I feel like if you want to know if you're watching, and prayer as well, just ask God, like, the first thing you should do, like, God, what is my purpose? You gave me a voice. What do you want me to do with it? Or, Father Lord, I'm an instrumentalist. You gave me this skill. Like, what do you want me to do with it? And God, like, if God has the blueprints of your life, He will tell you what to do with it. You also might find that you also find confirmation. I'm not saying we're looking for the approval of people, but it would.
Is it confirmation or affirmation? It's one. Anyway, so you're not looking for the approval.
That's a good one.
It's not one.
Come on.
Because I think affirmation is like, no, alright, stop. I think affirmation is that you have the that you have the you have that evidence in your heart of it, but then someone comes and then they say something that aligns with what you already know in your spirit.
But yeah, I think like, just like Dom was saying, I think it's, as a worship leader, I think one of those things that would definitely confirm what God has said to you, like I said before, is there would be a grace, there will be an ease in what you're doing. You won't struggle, you won't have to fight, and you will not have to fight for the position that's already yours. You will not have to fight for it. It's not a thing where you have to start struggling. This is my post. In fact, you won't even have to tell anybody that it's your post, because you'll be walking in it naturally. Because it's your ministry. That's the grace that God has given. That's a grace that God has already given to you. So you just walking it. You're walking in purpose, and when you're walking in the purpose that God has given to you, you won't struggle to do it. I think, and it's also the way you see the worship ministry. I think, because one thing that we always teach in RG Choir is that the microphone is not a trophy, it's a responsibility. And the way you see, if you see worship as a concert, then it's already God, because it's not unto man. Worship is unto God. It's us given to God. So when you understand that the mic is not a trophy but a responsibility, or when you decide, when you've had that understanding, that will be able to help you understand, actually, do I just like to sing, or am I a worship leader, or am I a worshipper in general? So just having the walking in purpose, I think understanding the purpose that God has given to you and walking in it, and as you walk in it, it's not something that you'll be struggling up and down, like you'll be striving, you'll be like, it's not really working. Like, I'm not gonna lie, like, I'd love to dance, I'd love to dance, I really would, but it's not my anointing. I'm sorry, but it's not. I'm really not gonna join the dance ministry in church, because it's not my. I'd love to do it, I'd love to do it, and it looks good, but the probabilities are I wouldn't look good doing it, because it's not my purpose. It's not what God has not called. I can tell you for free, God has not called me to dance. That is not what he called me to do. Like, it's not in my circle of grace to dance. Okay, so yeah, I think, like we said, like, it would be a desire in your heart. You have that desire in your heart to worship God. And I remember when I was very young, I always had that desire. Praise and worship, yeah. If I miss praise and worship, I'm vexed. I'm not even like, my spirit is like, geez, like, it's there's this pleasure that I have being in the presence of God. I love the presence of God. I love being in His presence. I love sitting at His feet. I love singing to Him. It's something that that's always been in my heart since I was young. So as I grew older and I was, well, by the grace of God, I started realizing my gifting and things like that. I just knew that actually, and when I started leading worship in church, because I started quite young, so I think I was 14 when I joined the worship team.
Oh, wow.
I think, yeah, 13, 14 when I joined the worship team. I felt like a form of a godly compelling, like it was something that I really wanted to do, and it wasn't because I just wanted to hold the mic. I genuinely just wanted to worship God. It was just a longing in my heart, and if this is the way that I can, if the gifting that God has given me will enable me to serve Him in this way of worshiping, then let's go. Like, God, let's do it, kind of thing. And with that, like I said, there'll just be an ease. Like, you won't be struggling have you seen, like, the people that will shout at the congregation and tell them, you are not lifting your hands, lift your hands right now in the sanctuary. Like, it's not something you struggle to do. Trust me, it happens. It's not something that it's true. No, it's true. That people be shouting at you, telling you what to do, because nobody's listening. If you are a good leader, and I'm talking in terms of leadership, in terms of worship leading, in terms of leadership, if you're a good leader, people will follow you. People will follow you. If you are a good leader, and that goes for worship as well. If you're a good worship leader, people will naturally follow you. But yeah, that's all I have to say on that part. I
want to add something I love. Because I just remember something. It's quite funny, actually. Yo, I used to be scared of the microphone. Like, I can't even stress this enough. Like, my first memory of singing, like, in front of a congregation, I was crying. Like, it wasn't a thing where somebody forced me. I just had stage fright. So I would be good until it go up. And then it would be like, the singing part, I would enjoy that. But then as soon as I opened my eyes and looked down, the people, man, like, I used to be shaking.
Oh, wow.
And I think I had one of these things where, I think that's why that whole thing with Moses, when he said, no, I can't talk because I'm a stammerer, I was like, Lord, no, I can't sing because I'm scared of people. Like, I don't want people looking at me. I don't want anybody looking. And actually, that took a while to get over. But the underlying thing was still there of, like, I wanted to do it. And I think that is what's hilarious to me, is the fact I want to do this and I'm up there crying. Like, I just think, honestly, is one of these things like Judy mentioned, is like the compulsion, the godly compulsion, the inner desire from God to want to do something that's going to overcome the natural. Because when I tell you I was scared of people, I used to, it's different now. We thank God for growth.
We do. Honestly, we do.
That's some great stuff. I think I really like that. You know, it's like the compulsion, the desire to do that thing will almost sort of be the thing that drives you into that role. And like you said, Judy, it will just be easy. Like, you know, God will give you the grace to take on that role as a worship leader. Awesome stuff, guys. So, I guess kind of leading on from that then is to be a worship leader. So as in to be, you know, leading music in a church. Do I have to be a good singer?
I'm going to pass this straight over to Dominique.
Why do you do that to me? Do you have to be a good singer? Here's the thing. I really, honestly, I think it's so easy to fall into, what is a good singer? because there's different styles of singing. And actually, let me tell you the truth, honestly, some people would go through life thinking, oh, I am not a good singer because they're singing wrong for them. Like, I don't know if Judy, please correct me on this when I say this. I know I've heard a story where this one person swore they went to be a rock and roll singer, for example, and then when they went to a vocal coach, the coach was like, actually, do you know your voice would be really good for soul? So like, that's one way of looking at it, where it's like, okay, you have to figure out what is your voice. Like, don't go trying to sound like sister so and so because sister so and so sings it. This means I should try to sing like that, because then really and truly it's not authentic. But then also you can't judge a fish on its ability to climb a tree. So you can't be trying to sing like ma'am when you're not supposed to be singing like her or him or whatnot. I do believe maybe it goes back to the whole thing of like when you think of the fact like when David played the harp and he was skilled at playing the harp, there is an element of ability there, if that makes sense. So when David was playing the harp, he wasn't just pulling random strings and hoping that it went together. He was able to make melodies. He was able to make music. So, and I hope I say this in the best way possible. If you struggle to, I'm saying this in the best way possible, and I'm just trying to, please stop me if I say anything that's sounding wrong. If you struggle musically, it may be a case where that may not be your calling. Looking back to what Judy said of like, there's a grace for certain things, but then don't let that stop you from worshiping. It may not be that your calling is a worship leader, but trust me when I say this. If your heart position is set on God, if you are thinking, God, you are my all, you are my everything, but God, but if that's your heart, right? But in the physical, you struggle to put a few notes together to sound quote unquote melodious. Trust that God is gonna accept your worship, because it's not a thing where He's like, oh, you don't sound right, so I don't want it. But know that on the other hand, when we're dealing with people, we know that people enjoy music is a thing, regardless of if you are Christian or not. Music is a thing that people enjoy, right? And then there's like, people come to expect certain things from quote unquote music or musicians or whatnot. So genuinely, worship leaders and musicians alike, there should be a level of skill with which you worship. I know back in the, and that means technically quote unquote you should be able to sing. Does that make sense? Because when I remember a World Pastor JP put a message on being they fought with by the edge of the sword, something to that effect, basically saying that when you fight or when you compete with the things of the world, you should be equipped in such a way that means that you can actually compete. So don't come with a dull knife thinking that you can compete with the world who's coming with a sharpened blade. So if the world has singers that quote unquote can sing, and I'm saying this, and I, Lord forbid I'm offending anybody, but I hope that this makes sense in that if people are going to come into the house of the Lord, we have to be understanding people's people are people, and what we hear, we like to hear certain things, if that makes sense. And it can be off-putting if when you come into the house of God, the person leading worship
can't sing.
Maybe sing, but okay. Go ahead, Judy. Take the rest of how long is she gonna make this?
I was almost holding my lips. So no, it's true. I feel like just the same way that somebody riffing and running and doing all the vocal acrobatics can also be a distraction. Just as much as somebody that is singing completely off key. There was an instance where I went somewhere and somebody was God forgive me, somebody was singing and I'm trying to worship, but it was physically disturbing me, like the voice.
Oh no.
It was I'm so sorry. And it wasn't, I could tell it wasn't just disturbing me, it was disturbing other people. and they were just kind of, everybody's just kind of looking around like, what is going on? And yes, her heart might have been in the right place, but at the same time, if we look at the book of First Chronicles 25, and it talks about how people, when David was building, or when David had the tabernacle, or built the tabernacle, and they had worshippers at the tabernacle, it specifically says, so the number of them with their brothers who were trained in singing to the Lord, all of whom were skillful, was 288. So they cast lots for their duty, small and great, teacher and student alike. So they were trained in singing to the Lord. It was a skill. It wasn't just something they just woke up and said, "Oh, I feel." It's not about whether you feel. You know, at the end of the day, I think if you're going to be if you're called to be a worship leader, God would have granted you the grace and given you the gifts to be able to sing. I think it would go along with each other. But just like Dom said something really important, like that, remembering what Pastor JP said about, you can't come to the world with your blunt knife. Like, it's not gonna work. If they're listening to other artists that, I'm not saying it's all about the voice. I really don't want everybody to think that worship is all about your voice. It's not. The position of your heart is more important than the vocals coming out of your mouth, because your lips, the Bible says, I think it's in, there's a verse in the Bible, I think it's Matthew 15, where it says, with their lips they honor me, but their hearts are far away from me. So you could be doing lip service, but your heart is somewhere else. So we don't want to take away from the posture of the heart, but at the same time, as a worship leader, in terms of the ministry of music, as we've seen as examples in the Bible, as the Bible clearly stated with its examples in First Chronicles 25, and even in First Chronicles 15, verse 16, where it clearly states that the people that were picked, specifically called for worship, were skilled in music. They were specifically skilled in music. And I think that even if you feel like you're called, and even if you feel like you're not there yet, because I'm not saying that you need to come and be sounding like Tasha Cobbs. Nobody's asking you to do that. And I believe that God has given every single person an individual gift, and your gift is your gift. You cannot fulfill your potential trying to be somebody else. It will never. You can't do that. It's not going to work. God has called you to be you, so be you. In terms of whatever gifting, every voice is different. Even the way the three of us talk is distinct. You can tell our voices are different. I might not get to say, I don't like my voice anymore. I'm gonna come and sound like Dominique. I want to talk like Dominique. I want the island accent. Like, no. Oh my gosh. Like, I'm not gonna do that, because God has made me to be me. God has created as a worshiper, as a worship leader. God has called me to worship the way I worship, or He's created me to worship with a specific sound. I cannot worship in spirit and in truth when I'm trying to be somebody else. Come on. Where's the truth? Where is the truth in you trying to be somebody else?
It's true.
But like I said, I feel like there needs to be a level of skill. Even if you do have a level of skill, even then, placement is important. Just because you have a voice, it doesn't mean you should show everybody that you have a voice. And you should be doing all the vocal acrobatics, because that can be just as much of a distraction as somebody that is going, all over praise and worship. Genuinely, if it's not your gift, and it's not by force, it's not by fire, not by force. It's not by fire, it's not by force. Not by fire, not by fire. And don't ever and don't feel bad for that. The thing is, I think sometimes we put the worship ministry as some kind, if people almost worship the worship industry, as in, like, people put it on this pedestal of that's the best ministry to be part of. And it will also expose your motives, because are you trying to get into the worship team even though you can't sing? Are you trying to be there because you want people to see that you're serving? So you want to share the pulpit with the pastor, but your vocals aren't, they're not.
No, I just think it's back to the heart.
Like, it's literally, it all goes, this every single point, it just goes straight back to the posture of your heart. If you can't sing, it's okay.
Wow. We have talked about so much today, and we are gonna have to leave it there for now. Remember that worship is all about your heart posture. It is all about the position of your heart. There is still so much more for us to talk about that we are gonna be delving into in this series. I am so excited as we continue to share this series with you, so make sure that you come back again next week for the second part in this series. In the meantime, for a great word, why not check out Faith Express and Love Life and Faith on Covenant Church UK's YouTube channel. You will be so blessed as you watch these videos. See you next week.